Hydra Splatling is the longest range and most damaging of all the Splatling class weapons. It's also the slowest and has the longest charge time. It's the longest range weapon you're going to get without getting into chargers. Because they have a charge time, Splatling class weapons are all about timing. To play a Splatling weapon means you're trying to show up in the right place at the right time. With an amazing charge time of a whopping 120 frames, the Hydra Splatling takes this idea to the extreme. If you can manage, though, to play well and get in position at the right time, you can reap extreme rewards. Emphasis on reap. The greater capacity for lethality makes the Hydra tend a little bit away from its other Splatling cousins into more charger territory. While the Splatlings are backliners that focus on support and making the other players better, the Hydra will also take on the role of picking off key targets, such as squids who have their specials charged and squids who are carrying the objective. Here are my rules for picking the right Hydra kit. Rule number 1. Don't pick Vanilla Hydra. Thank you for listening, and okay. Here's why you shouldn't pick Vanilla Hydra. Now, taking a look at the subs, we can see that the Autobomb and the Ink Mine are pretty equal in power. I might say that the Autobomb is slightly better than the Ink Mine, but when it comes down to it, whether or not to play the Vanilla versus the Custom Hydra is a matter of which special is better. And Splashdown is definitely the worst special. Splashdown isn't ideal on any kit, but even if it were buffed into relevance tomorrow, it wouldn't do very well with the Hydra Splatling. The Hydra Splatling spends most of its time in the backline and has to charge its shots before it fires, which doesn't complement the aggressive nature of the Splashdown. Imagine the situations where it does make sense to use the Splashdown. You can, 1, use it defensively as a panic button in case anybody gets too close to you when you're not ready. This is fine, but that means you're holding a special for sometimes really long stretches and essentially not doing anything with it. You could also try and get aggressive with the Splashdown, but imagine what that would look like. You have to get way out of position now to use it, and any enemy who notices you and who's smart will look and see that you have your special ready and be ready to counterplay against the Splashdown. Your final option with the Splashdown would be to use a super jump to try and catch somebody off guard. Now, this is very situational and doesn't always work, and after the super jump is over, you may also find yourself out of position and having to trek all the way back to the back lines in order to be effective with your main weapon once again. We've established that you're pretty much stuck using the custom Hydra, so let's figure out how to get that kit working for you. The Ink Mine is one of the worst subs in the game, but you have it, so you might as well use it. One of the main usage cases for the Ink Mine is to place it around flanking routes so that you'll have an early warning in case a frontliner is coming around to try and get the jump on you. As it is well known, frontliners flanking Hydras is the leading cause of death amongst Hydra players in 2019. So having a little bit of extra warning that they're coming up will help you react and either reposition or get a charge ready to counter them instead. It's also worth noting that placing mines in areas where you expect the enemy Rainmaker or Clamps to be traveling through will impede their progress and buy you a little bit of time to defend against an enemy push. Your special is Ink Armor, which is a quality special that benefits the whole team. It applies an additional 30 HP to your character, but it has a unique property. If you take an attack that is more than 30, but less than 200 damage, it will tank up to 100 of that damage. This means, for example, if you have Ink Armor up and you get shot by a fully charged charger, you'll end up only taking 50 damage, essentially meaning that Ink Armor will have tanked 100 of the damage. This is really good for Hydra. Since it's such a slow weapon, this gives you the option to, instead of running away from something like a bomb or a charger, to instead tank the hit and then go for the counterattack while the enemy is trying to regroup. Other than that, the best time to use Ink Armor is when everybody's alive, your team is about to push, or the enemy team is about to push into you. As you can see from the clip I just showed, having ink armor up and being able to take extra damage allowed us to come back from overtime and take the lead in the last minute. Let's take a minute to talk about gear. Now I'm going to share my personal loadout, and if you want to copy it, go for it. It's a really good and versatile kit that's carried me for the past couple months. However, let's explain why this is good, and maybe you want to switch things up. I'm going to divide gear abilities into 3 categories: things that the Hydra needs, things that the Hydra really wants, and things that's good on the Hydra, but not necessary. The Hydra needs to have at least 5 subs of main power up. This will bring your partial charge damage to 33.3, which means that if an enemy even so much as thinks about your color of ink, 3 hits will be enough to splat them instead of 4. You're also going to need 1 sub of Ink Saver main. This brings you from 2 full charges on a full ink tank to 3 full charges on a full ink tank without having to reload. This is very helpful. In terms of stuff that's probably a really good idea, you're going to want to pick up Run Speed. Run Speed does a lot to improve the pretty lackluster mobility of the Hydra, and since you're going to be having these long sustained firing periods, you're not going to be able to swim away as a method of dodging. Also, at least 1 sub, and probably no more than 3 subs of Bomb Defense up, will help you tank a couple of hits from things like Inkjet Bursts and Splat Bombs that might roll too close to you. Finally, you can go up to 1 main and 3 subs of Ink Saver main to get up to 4 full charges from the Hydra instead of 3, but you probably should never go above that because of diminishing returns. Finally, other things that are pretty good to have on Hydra are things like Quick Super Jump, Special Charge Up, Special Power Up, Tenacity, and Respawn Punisher. Let's talk about the actual gun part of this gun. As stated before, Hydra takes 120 frames to charge fully, and you are heavily incentivized to charge it the entire way. On a full charge, you get your maximum range, increased damage output, and a more efficient ratio of time spent firing to time spent charging. This long wind-up time means you're going to have to do a lot of planning ahead. While you're charging, you want to know where you're going to be once you start firing, and in what direction you will be firing. This means that reading enemy movement and predicting enemy position is a very important skill to effectively playing this weapon. Prediction is unfortunately something that can't be learned overnight, and even listening to this, you won't be a master of prediction. However, what I am going to tell you will help you learn prediction more quickly. By noticing these things in matches, you'll be more suited to realize where you should be positioning yourself and shooting. The first thing to take note of is that in each map, there are positions that certain types of weapons like to take because it is most advantageous for the way that weapon functions. In this clip, the enemy comp consists of 2 backliners, another custom Hydra, and the E-Leader on Walleye Warehouse. Now I know from playing a backliner that one of the best defensive positions to take up is up on this perch. It's very hard to challenge it as a frontliner. However, as a backliner, I can safely challenge it, and I do. Unfortunately, the E-Leader does retreat, but that does buy time for the rest of my team. Another way to predict what a weapon will do is based on common behaviors. Certain weapons employ specific strategies because it tends to work out for them. Right here, after pushing the E-Leader off, and while I was trying to challenge the 96, I see a curling bomb go my way. Now I know that the other team has a roller, so I know that the roller is on its way. Now it's not behind the curling bomb, so one can assume the only place it could be is on the other side of this container. I quickly shift position and do a partial charge, and I'm able to intercept him before he can get the pick on me. The third and final way to hone your prediction skills is to pay attention to the objective. Now, the previous 2 examples have been dealing only with getting picks, so it's important to talk about the objective and your relation to it. As a backliner, you're second in line to push the objective, right before the Slayers, but right after your midline support weapons. However, you are primed to stop the enemy from pushing, so it's important to know what sort of paths enemies take to push the objective. Now for tower control, it's easy. There's a set path that the tower takes, and if you aren't sure what it is, you can always jump into recon and see where the tower goes throughout the map. However, for the other 3 modes, the best way to learn the paths that enemies take to get the objective is to pay attention to what you're doing. Notice the different types of ways you get to the objectives and plan on where you need to be to counter those paths. It's even better if you try and play a couple other weapon roles, because different weapon roles tend to take different paths to the objective. Slayers tend to take routes that will easily let them flank, and your support weapons try and get as close to the objective as possible. If you pay attention to these paths, then you'll be able to get in position at the right time to make a difference in the match. I keep talking about being in position and predicting with this weapon because if you're reacting, it means you've already lost. The greatest weakness of this weapon is that it's slow. It takes forever to charge, to shoot, and not only that, but you're weighed down by it, meaning your swim speed is reduced as compared to other weapons, and even though your strafing speed is decent, it's still the worst among all the other weapons in its class. That being said, it's important to know all of Hydra's movement tricks in order to maximize favorable outcomes. Alright, first things first is we have to talk about a concept called sightlines. Now, what is a sightline? A sightline is your ability to see a percentage of the playing field. That means a good sightline allows you to see a lot of area, and a bad sightline restricts your view quite considerably. Now, most of the maps in Splatoon are designed to give a sightline advantage. The closer you are to your spawn, and a disadvantage the further you push up. Since sightlines are so important to the Hydra, it makes sense to stay behind your other teammates to get the best sightlines possible. However, if you stand in a sightline, you make yourself vulnerable to the enemy team, and therefore will lead to our first trick. The first trick is peeking. And now before you tell me that every gun peeks, the Splatling class does it in a very specific way, and that involves ABS, which is an acronym for Already Be Shooting. Those guns. Seriously though, you need to be shooting before you actually step out of cover. That way, your kill time is that much faster as compared if you took the milliseconds to release the trigger to start shooting. If you're already shooting, you have an opportunity to beat short-range weapons that would otherwise be an advantaged state against you. So remember, use your abs. The next movement trick I affectionately refer to as tiding. Tiding is when you move forward while you're firing your gun, and then when you move back while you're charging or moving to charge. Now, a wise Splatoonman once told me, don't walk into the bullets, and that's a good call. That's a good call. When you're playing most of the other guns, you're going to want to be moving either backwards to kite the enemy or side to side to strafe them during a firefight. However, the Hydra's incredible range gives you an incredible buffer zone for you to move forward through while you're firing. This can be an excellent defensive technique against most other guns because it will keep them out of whatever you're trying to protect. Remember, as a backliner, you're trying to control the area, so moving forward and stalling out the opponents can be a great way to get your team to rally and make a counter push against the enemy's offense. Finally, let's talk about courage. As a Hydra, you have to have at least a little bit of courage. This is going to combine good prediction as well as good movement, and fold it into the concept of partial charges. The Splatling class is built on how much it's going to charge in any engagement. And when you're trying to play aggressively, you're going to have to get comfortable with partial charges and how much you're going to need to charge to beat any particular matchup. Now, a lot of times, short-range players will assume as a backliner, if they get close, you will retreat, and they will act accordingly. However, if you defy their expectations, show a little courage, use a partial charge, you might surprise them and get a kill they weren't expecting. Remember, even a partial charge has the same fire rate, which means you can still get a 16-frame kill with a partial charge, which compared to a lot of frontline weapons is very good. So if they're expecting to chase you down, Standing your ground and letting loose a partial charge might end up getting you the kill instead of them. The vast majority of Splatoon 2's arsenal are weapons that can't hope to match your range, so matchups against them really just come down to keeping them within your range without getting into theirs. That being said, if they do get close, you still have the option of partial charging to pull out ahead. However, when we're talking about specific matchups, it really only helps to talk about weapons that have similar range to the Hydra. So we're going to be talking about Splatlings and Chargers. Your worst matchup is the Charger. The Hydra Splatling, out of all the other Splatlings, has the worst mobility options, and having bad mobility options means it's a lot easier for Chargers to pick you off. The other problem is that a Charger, with a charge stored, is going to be able to kill you faster than you are going to be able to kill them, even if you've got a charge ready. The only way to really get rid of a Charger is for them not to be focusing you down, or for them to have already fired their charge when you have one ready. If you can try and force these situations, you might have a fighting chance, but always be wary, especially when going up against the E-leaders. Now that being said, you may, especially in lower ranks, just come up against bad Chargers, and the only way to really know is if they consistently miss you. If you are up against bad Chargers, then disregard this and feel free to disrespect them. This is legitimately important because wasting your time and focus fighting bad Chargers as if they were good will take away from effort you could be spending elsewhere. The other class of long-range weapon you need to be looking out for are the other Splatlings. Now, Hydra, conversely to Chargers, has very good matchups against most Splatlings, with its worst matchup being the Mirror. When it comes down to it, you're going to outrange and outpace the other ones in terms of damage, so if you can just get them to commit to bad attacks, you can almost always come out on top. Thank you for watching the video. I hope that this information was able to help you improve your play with the Hydra Splatling. As of patch 4.4, the Hydra Splatling has received a multitude of buffs to its mobility and its damage output, and has managed to avoid most of the nerfs that have been plaguing the other Splatling class weapons. So now is as good a time as any to start learning this weapon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and follow. Also, please check out our Twitch channel where I tend to play Splatoon at least a couple times a week, amongst other games. Also, feel free to leave a comment asking me what weapon to talk about next. I love doing these videos, but I never am sure which weapons to cover. Okay, video over.